everybody. Okay, there we go. I want to welcome everyone to our last program of our 2021 year. I'm very excited to see you all. My name is Veronica Williams, and I have the honor of serving as the president of the Willamette Women Democrats. Before we get going, I want to make a few remarks. You will notice that we have turned off your video and your sound. Having videos running can sometimes disrupt the way our program transmits through. So if you're on right now, you may get clicked off, and please don't turn yourself back on unless you're asking, we get to the question and answer, or I'm introducing people. Please feel free at any time to put your questions in the chat. We will go through our questions with the panel and then introduce a few people who are electeds on the call with us. And then we'll get to the Q&A. So please drop questions in the chat at any time. Just a few quick remarks. We always say that every vote counts. And if you were with us last month, you know that I spent time talking to everybody and encouraging folks to please vote and to invite their friends to vote, etc. And I just want to say a couple things. We had some very close elections. We have a candidate that we supported in the West Linn School District who lost by 24 votes. We have a candidate that we supported to run for city council in Beaverton who came in at 49.5% of the vote and is now having to run again to in September. So I just really want to emphasize how important voting is and to remind you all that we're here to help educate you, expose you to issues that occur locally all the way through nationally, and to help you be active citizens, not just Facebook commentators or MSNBC watchers, but people who really get out and make a difference in their communities. So with that, I am going to turn it over to our program chair, Nancy Murray, and she will introduce our three mayors who are speaking with us today. Thank you.
As we know, local government is where the rubber meets the road in terms of service to residents. Mayors are accessible to their constituents in a way that other politicians are not. I wonder how they get through a simple grocery shopping without being stopped and asked questions or given a point of view from a resident. Lacey Beaty was recently elected mayor of Beaverton, Oregon's 7th largest city, with a population today of around 100,000 residents. She was the youngest elected Beaverton City Councilor at age 29 years of age in 2015. Even knowing how hard it is to run a big city with a diverse population and please your constituents, Lacey had the courage to run for mayor last November and beat a longtime incumbent in the process. Another example of her courage on a different front was her 5-year service in the 1st Infantry Division during the Iraq War, where she was a radiology specialist and combat medic. She was able to go to college on the GI Bill and has earned a degree in political science from OSU and a graduate degree in management and organizational leadership from Warner Pacific University. Lacey has used her previous profession in public health to lead the ambitious expansion of school-based health centers within many of our largest school districts in Oregon, delivering healthcare to thousands of students. Joe Buck is mayor of Lake Oswego and also served on his city council. Many of us have enjoyed delicious meals in the Lake Grove area of Lake Oswego for decades, thanks to Joe and his family. He owns and operates several local restaurants, including his family's three-generation establishment, Gubanks. As with our other two mayors, Joe has volunteered in many community capacities to improve both business success and residents' quality of life. Like Lacey, Joe also served in the military and is a veteran of the U.S. Coast Guard. He graduated from the University of Portland with a degree in business administration and accounting. And Jules Walters is mayor of West Linn, a beautiful and growing suburb located on the west side of the Willamette River. Like her colleagues heard today, she first served on her city council. Jules is a progressive, pro-choice Democrat and a graduate of Emerge Oregon Boot Camp, an organization that recruits, trains, and inspires Democratic women to run for office, and an organization that W2D actively supports. A working mother of 4 children, she advocates for busy families through policies that address education, safety, wellness, childcare, and economic opportunity. Jules earned a BA in journalism from the University of San Francisco and is currently pursuing a master's degree from the University of Oregon in strategic communication to apply her knowledge toward campaigns that support social justice and equity. I've left out much of the public service work that these 3 mayors have already accomplished because you'll hear about some of them during our time together this afternoon. It looks like the mayor's baton has been passed to a new generation, and we are more than excited to see what their more youthful ideas and energy will provide their cities. Welcome, mayors.
Thank you, Nancy. So I'm going to start out with a question for everyone, and I think I'm going to start with you, Lacey, and then we'll go to Joe and Jules, and then we'll kind of move around from that point. So would you please name one thing that's related to why you chose to run for mayor? So I know there's a lot of issues, but what's the one thing that caused you to say, I want to be the mayor, not just a member of the city council?
That's a great question. And I want to thank you for that awesome intro. You could be my hype woman anytime, and we'll just get some walk-on music and we'll go on a road show together. I think for me, probably the driving force is representation. You know, particularly when I looked at the mayors in Washington County, they tend to look a certain way, and they tend to all kind of look like each other. And I think while they've opened up their mayor arms and have allowed me into their club, I think when women serve and moms serve at the table, things get done differently. And, you know, for me, I knew with my public health background, my military background, leading during this global pandemic was a time that I had to say yes. And so I did.
Great. Joe?
I think for me, it was about creating a more accessible community, you know, here in OLO. And it's an honor to serve as the mayor of the town that I was raised in and, you know, grew up in, played in as a kid, went to school in, you know, but over the years, it's such a great community. And we've been seeking these ways, you know, for decades to have more people be able to experience what a childhood, the benefits of a childhood in Lake Oswego. And so I decided to run for mayor to make it a place that more kids can have the same childhood similar to me. That was what drove me forward.
Jules?
Thank you. And yes, thank you for that great introduction. You know, there were many reasons I decided to run for mayor. I think what was most important to me is that there was a mayor and also a new council that really more adequately reflected the views of the people in West Linn. I think we had stagnated for a while and were sort of caught on the same issues over and over again, and not really as forward and future looking as we could be. So I think that's really what inspired me to run.
Great, thank you. The next one, I'm gonna start with you, Joe. So what are the top 3 issues in your city? And what are your short-term goals? Now, I mean, I know from the 3 of you, from my personal knowledge, that you are forward thinkers. And so obviously everything can't get done tomorrow. But what are the top 3 issues, and what do you hope to see done in the next few years as it relates to those 3 issues?
Well, for us this year, we have more than 3, but the top 3 that we're working on, I'd say right now we're going through a community conversation on policing that started at the beginning of the year and is ongoing through this year. And what we're trying to accomplish through that is making sure that we have a community that is safe for everyone here. That everyone feels. I know when I walk down the street, when I go to a public park, when I'm out and about, driving my car, I feel very secure. We want to make sure that everyone in the town has that same security when they're out and about. And so we engage with the community, with our police department. We're using data from the state, and really looking at all aspects, working with our police chief and the police leadership and members of the community to determine how we can foster that kind of an environment here in Lake Oswego, which, we have to recognize how fortunate we are. I mean, we're one of the safest communities, if not in Oregon, even, in the whole region, if not nationwide. Very, very, very fortunate to have such a low crime rate, which means I think it affords us an opportunity to do more than some others. Our other main goal this year has been implementation of our kind of strategic climate action plan. That's a plan that we put into the works back when I served on the council, and that sat stagnant for a couple of years, and so we made that a top goal this year. That plan's implementation, and then we're also working on the implementing. We created a diversity, equity, and inclusion advisory board, stemmed from a task force that we had over this past year, and now we've made that into a more permanent board. We've just recruited for that now, along with the rest of our boards and commissions, and we just had a extremely large number of folks apply to serve on that board. There's huge community interest in being a part of these efforts to make the city more inclusive, equitable. We've also hired an equity program manager. We've just finished recruitment for that, so that new person will be starting soon.
Great, thanks. Jules?
Thank you. I can piggyback on a lot of what Joe just said. We're going through a lot of similar issues. As you know, we had a police scandal, I guess is probably the most minimum word I could use, in 2019. We've been working really hard on police reform through that. And it also opened up a lot of discussions in our city about exactly what Joe said, people who don't feel safe walking their dog because of the color of their skin. Even though they live here, they pay the same taxes, they live in a beautiful house, it's just completely unacceptable. So we did an equity audit of the city. We are partnering with consultants and DEI work. We are doing programming through the library. And there's so much more work to do, so much more. So that has been a big driver of my work since I was on council and now as mayor. And also as we're coming out of COVID. So when I think about the full last year between, dealing with the aftermath of the police scandal, then the death of George Floyd and COVID and wildfires and a smoke incident, and then a horrible ice storm, it's just been nonstop sort of chaos. So we're really focusing on emergency preparedness and disaster resilience. We've hired a new we are hiring somebody to do that work with us so that we're more prepared next time, as prepared as we can be. But also when I look back at safe spaces and welcoming spaces, I want to make sure that that's for everyone, especially including our youth, and make sure we have indoor spaces for them to go to after school, if both parents are working, so they have a safe place to be, to play, to just increase their opportunities for positive interaction. And then, of course, another big goal of ours in West Linn has always been and continues to be to develop and support opening up our waterfront and embracing its cultural heritage and making it accessible. to everyone in Oregon. So those are really the goals on my table right now, and I've got a lot of work to do. So I'll leave it to Lacey.
It's almost like Veronica's worked with and around politicians for a long time, because she was like, tell us 3 things, only 3 things. I know you're going to go off script. So I had to think, I had 2 mayors ahead of me to go. And I just want to note though, I feel like all of us had a hard time. We got elected in like the worst global pandemic, economic depression, all of this stuff. If you're not following Mayor Walters, like she's my mayor crush. She has lived through the ice storm, police scandals, floated on top, ran an election to replace, so follow Mayor Walters, because she's someone I call when, I ask myself this often, where do leaders go when they need help? And I call Mayor Walters. So if you live in her city, you're pretty lucky for that. 3 goals for me right now, a little untraditional from the other 2. We went through a charter change. And when I started to run for mayor, it was to run to be the full-time mayor and city manager. And then we had a charter change pass in the same election that we went into a runoff. And so one of the non-sexy things I've had to deal with is changing our entire form of government in real time while I'm sitting in the mayor's seat. And we just announced the hiring of our first full-time city manager. We had an interim city manager, then we hired our full-time city manager. She's not coming till September. So we have a couple months of chaos still to go, but our staff are really looking for leadership right now. Our community doesn't understand what a city manager does, doesn't really know what the mayor does and what the rules and parts that are different. So we have a lot of education happening in our community on what is a city manager. I'm a full-time mayor, and so I'm in the building all the time, which is confusing staff. So getting this next transition right is really top of mind to me. Second is climate change. What we need to do around climate, we needed to do 10 years ago. So I passed in my first 90 days in office the ability to create a climate action task force. We had over 150 community members apply to that task force to be in the inaugural group. And we did some non-traditional ways to make sure that we had really good representation. We went out and dropped flyers in our 2 lowest represented census tract districts. And so we looked at who serves on board and commissions now. We looked at our census data, and we went out and dropped flyers on their doorstep asking them to apply. We actually had a really good response from that. I'm committed to 50% of the membership being under the age of 30 and being BIPOC focused on that group. So we're interviewing next week in a marathon of interviews, 45 people for that inaugural group. So that's going to be dominating my next week. And then of course, once we pick them, the hard work begins. And of course, like my other 2 mayors, police reform and police accountability are on the top of the list. The murder of George Floyd should have caused every elected official in this country to ask themselves to relook at public safety. And when you call 911, do we have the right people doing the right work? As a prior military veteran, as someone who's married to a military police officer, we need to make sure that we're supporting our police department in a way that makes sense. And that is by not asking them to be everyone's everything. And so how do we get the right people to do the right work is the lens that I'm looking at when we're talking about police reform over the next year. That was 3.
Great. Awesome. You guys are good, I'll tell you. Joe, would you share some examples of how you work with and learn from your fellow mayors?
Oh, sure. That's a great question. Well, so we have various, regional groups, and there's a Metropolitan Mayors Consortium where I get to come each month, and I see Mayor Walters and Mayor Beaty there. And, that group, there's been quite a bit of turnover in elected office throughout, the metro area. So I think a lot of these groups are going through some changes after having a lot of the same membership for many, for many years. And so there's some maybe growing pains, I guess you say, or just with the change. There's also, Mayor Walters and I, since we're both in Clackamas County, we tend to see each other more. So, cities within Clackamas, they have more meetings together. We have a subcommittee of a group called C4 that meets, and then we see each other at C4 as well. And there's Metro's Policy Advisory Committee. So anyway, there's just different groups where we all work together. I think those groups do provide a lot of support that I've been able to draw from, especially during the pandemic when we haven't been at the typical get-togethers that we would have, or we'd be able to network. We do face, even though our cities are all different sizes, different counties, different demographics, we do face, as we're hearing from our priorities, I mean, so many of the same issues, and we don't need to be reinventing the wheel, in every city. So there's so much to learn from what's going on just in our backyard with our neighboring colleagues. So it's been, I mean, with these two especially, just been great one-on-one conversations, getting to know who's serving, and as we explore kind of solutions to all the common problems and that we face. It's great having such a good group. I'll say that virtually all the mayors, and the great thing about mayors, they all come from different backgrounds and perspectives too. There's no two mayors that are just identical in the region, and all those different perspectives enable lots of good productive thinking. So.
Great, thank you. Lacey, how are you looking at the federal funds that are coming in now to address important initiatives in Beaverton? I know, this is budgeting season, but of course, everybody had pretty much been through the work that is needed to put together a city budget about the time that new money suddenly appeared with, of course, I understand 150 pages of instruction. So how is Beaverton looking at that, and how are you looking at it?
Man, we're doing awesome. I think one of the beauties of having a full-time mayor, so if anyone's looking for a side hustle, getting your mayors to be full-time, really important, because this work is hard. And when we limit it to, part-time capacity, you get a part-time mayor that has to work and do other things. I got to focus solely on ARPA money the last couple months. So our city was directly funded at about 16.9 million that came into us. And I've been able to work with our federal delegation. Congresswoman Bonamici selected one of our projects, our downtown loop, and pledged $4 million to that project. We also are doing something really interesting in the economic development space. We're starting a nonprofit incubator. So a lot of this ARPA money is coming into government and then exiting the door to nonprofits to do the work that cities and states aren't really equipped to do. We know, having spent my career in nonprofit management, we need to wrap around those people with good services. So we're starting a nonprofit incubator. Our city runs a technology incubator, so we're already really good at it. We're just going to shift our focus. So we've gotten about $1.5 million of federal and state money in that effort. And with our state reps and state senators, we've been able to work in coalition together to deliver some really big projects to Beaverton. $2.5 million to operate a severe weather shelter. There's not one that operates 24 hours a day in all of Washington County. Home Plate Youth Services is Washington County's only nonprofit that's addressing youth homelessness and housing instability. We've been able to get them about $1.5 million to complete their capital campaign. We are starting a mental health court to address some of our mental health disparities in our system. And so we've been able to cobble some money together. But I would say that our team in Beaverton has been laser focused on a couple projects, and we made them turnkey ready. And what I constantly tell our city council, since I'm out there lobbying on behalf of our city, is that it can't be just about projects that we want. It has to be projects that the receiving elected official wants. So they kind of got to be ready to go. They got to be sexy. They got to be something they want to invest in, and they got to solve a problem. So we did a pitch-a-thon in City Hall where I let all the department heads come and pitch me on ideas, and we picked 4 and we stayed really disciplined in them. So I think as long as, and I see Senator Wagner is on this call too. So if he can keep the wheels on the bus in Salem, I think we're going to get a lot of things done for cities. So no pressure, Senator, but I think you have a lot of work to do. So I'm surprised to see you here.
Oh, he doesn't like to miss it. This is, Lamb and Women Dems is where things happen. We have him trained. Jules, can you talk about the challenge of moving from a fellow city councilor to being the mayor? All 3 of you are having this experience, but I would just like your take on what it's been like?
You know, it's been a really great ride so far, I have to say. It's been, that's definitely had its challenges. I was sworn in on January 4th and the ice storm hit on February 12th. So we're still in recovery of that incident. It's in the middle of COVID, but I have to say I'm really loving the work. I feel really connected to the community in a way that I didn't as a city councilor, and people will reach out directly to me and ask me questions, talk to me about different issues. It's really exciting. I mean, serving on council, it's a lot of work, but being a mayor is definitely another layer of work. And it is, like Lacey said, it's a full-time job. So I think the most fun part for me, besides just talking to the community, is the regional partnerships that we were just talking about. And I totally agree with Joe. You know, it's great to have these calls and meet other mayors. Like, I can pick up my phone and text Lacey or Joe if I have a question about something, or, I have a good relationship with the mayor in Tualatin, the mayor in Wilsonville, the mayor in Oregon City, so that we can, talk together about what things that have worked and haven't worked, so that we can really come to the table with better answers. So it's been great. I'm really enjoying it.
Great.
Keeping my fingers crossed that there's not another natural disaster anytime soon.
We
But
all
great.
are. We've had our share. So this is for all of you. Combating racism and advancing diversity, equity, and inclusion are key challenges at all levels of our society. How are you focusing in beyond the slogans and the proclamations? And I'm actually going to go back to you, Jules, and let you start with that. And then we'll go to Lacey and then to Joe.
Thank you. I think, it's going to take a lot of leaning in. It's going to take a lot of work. And I'm lucky that we have a terrific, group of community members who are particularly invested and involved, whether on a personal level or as a, if they're a BIPOC person or they're an ally, that they're really digging into the work and making sure that they're holding us accountable for doing it at City Hall as well, and in our police department and all of our police departments. I think the proclamations are important too. I think you'd be surprised how, like, we just did a Juneteenth proclamation last week. We just did our Pride proclamation for the third time this year, and that really means something to our community members who identify as LGBTQ, to know that at City Hall we're proclaiming it Pride Month in West Linn. But it has to go farther than that, and we all know that. So continuing the work of making sure that we're including safe spaces and programs and just different ways for people to connect. The next step in our work after our equity audit is to start an equity citizens group to come in and have that be a very diverse group to help us move forward in this work through their lens and not ours, right? So I'm just really excited to keeping that ball rolling. It's going to be many years, but we could do a lot quickly. So thank you.
Man, you hit us in our mayor heart with the proclamation thing, like that. That's our jam. And it is surprising. It is surprising though how hard it is to sometimes get that stuff done, because I do think words matter, and they're stronger when you could not just issue in a mayoral proclamation, but get your entire city council on. And I don't like to bring forward proclamations that I think aren't going to bring full support, because I think it's hurtful to the community. But I think, that is a huge question and a huge undertaking. And I just have a couple examples for you. One, you can't be what you can't see. And so getting other leaders elected is something I work on quite often. School boards are my jam. I spent my public health career in school-based health centers, making sure that we have great representation at every level of government. And I think Democrats, since I'm speaking to a soft audience here, we haven't paid attention to local government as much as Republicans have. We've gotten better, we're doing a lot, but like Veronica said at the start, we lost a school board race by a few votes in West Linn. We lost a school board member in Hillsborough. Ashley on our city council has to go into a runoff. If we voted based on what impacted our life the most, it wouldn't be the president at the top of the ticket. It'd be your school board, your mayors, your county commissioners. While the president is a really important figure, what impacts your life the most is held in local government. And groups like this have turned the tide on helping build the bench. Our county parties have turned the tide in that, but we can't fall asleep at the wheel. That's probably the most important thing that we can do to make sure, because who's at the table when we're making these decisions is a direct impact in policy outcomes. So that's my pitch to get more involved. Secondly, the other thing, after when you go to run for office, people, the thing that they talk about, what's going on your voter pamphlet statement? What are people going to look at? Mayors have unique responsibilities of appointing people to boards and commissions. So how are we doing that work? For my climate action task force, I've asked the full-time staffer at the Oregon League of Conservation Voters to join me in selecting, and I've asked our BOLD graduate, it's our BIPOC refugee leadership training program. So I've asked one of their graduates this year to join me on the committee picking our first climate action task force. I did the same thing with our Mayor's Youth Advisory Board. I had the president of the Black Parent Union join me and the president of the Beaverton Education Association helping me pick those people. We unintentionally give people a leg up in our government when they're appointed to boards and commissions because of their proximity to power. And so to not get caught up in the loop that a lot of people do, which is appoint all your friends as soon as you get elected, I brought in the table by asking different people to help me select them. And then of course, we measure what we treasure. So what is our city measuring and where's our budgetary dollars going? So that's how I think we can have some meaningful impact in the next couple of years.
Great, thank you. Joe?
Such great responses from my fellow mayors. I'm going to echo a lot of it. We in Lake Oswego, when I first came on the city council, I was kind of indoctrinated to this notion that our job as a city council is to take care of the roads and make sure the community is safe. That's it. That's all we're doing. And, that never really resonated with me. I think it's really important that the city council is setting the tone, for the community. And so this year so far, we're celebrating for the first time. We had Asian American Pacific Islander Heritage Month celebration. We're having the Juneteenth celebration. We proclaimed MLK Day. We proclaimed Pride Month. These are things that the city has never done, ever. And it's because, to Mayor Beatty's point, it's because of the diversity we have on the council. It was Councilor Linn, our first person of color, who brought forth AAPI, Heritage Month and arranged to have the celebration. So having folks of different perspectives and backgrounds that more diverse, our city council in Lake Oswego is younger and more diverse than it's ever been in its history, and it's showing in the actions that we're taking. And members of the community who never felt like their city council supported them and spoke to them are coming forward and feeling like they have leaders in the town that understand, what they're going through, and have walked in their shoes. And that's really, heartening to see. But to create, so it's about creating an atmosphere, in the town where we're really recognizing the diversity of the folks that do live in the community, and celebrating beyond just, what Joe Buck celebrates, very narrow, and that benefits everyone, and it makes for a greater city. I'd say our other big challenge in Lake Oswego around this is the housing. It's very expensive to live in Lake Oswego, and we don't have the same, great array of housing, say that Beaverton has. So much single family, multifamily, middle housing. It's very limited. And so we have right now we have 4 different projects underway to add family affordable housing. There is not a single unit of secured family affordable housing in Lake Oswego, not a single one. And I know, Senator Wagner on this call served decades ago on an affordable housing task force aimed to tackle this. That was almost 2 decades ago, and absolutely nothing happened, afterwards, despite all the best efforts of that group. And so the tide is changing. We're doing everything we can to. He was very young. He may have been the student member on that board. But we have to provide, when you provide housing in a community, like Lake Oswego, like where you have a great school district. I mean, you're changing people's lives. You're providing an opportunity for the next generation to be better than the one that came before. And so for me, there's really nothing more important than providing affordable housing, different types of housing, middle housing, and making sure that our community is more accessible to a more diverse range of people.
Super. I am going to stop with just my questions to the panel. I'm going to welcome some people who are with us, who are elected officials, and then I'm going to go to questions from our audience. So if you have questions, please drop them in the chat. And I have a few if you don't have any. But I'd like to welcome previously mentioned State Senator Rob Wagner, former Representative Margaret Doherty, Tualatin City Councilor Bridget Brooks, and if there are other electeds, because I see some phone numbers and I don't know what the names are, please feel free to drop yourself into the chat so that I can recognize you, and I'll find a moment to do so while we're going through our questions. So, questions in the chat. First one. Okay. I know West Linn and Beaverton have both issued proclamations around gun violence prevention at the request of constituents. Is there a reason that Lake O could not or would not issue a proclamation to support the fight against gun violence and honor survivors of it? So I guess that's for you, Joe.
No one's brought it forward.
So get the community to raise the issue, right?
Yeah.
Okay, also I want to recognize that Lake Oswego School Board member Neelam Gupta has joined us. And we will go on. I have another question that was submitted to me before the event, and I will try and shorten it a bit. So it relates to mental health and the concern that there are not, I guess they said a recent request of the Clackamas County Behavioral Health revealed that Lake Oswego has one mental health adult foster home. Beaverton has 2, West Linn has none. Additionally, none of these cities have residential treatment homes or facilities to serve friends and family members with serious and persistent mental illness who are unable to live independently. So can you speak to that without me going into a very long read here? And we'll start with Lacey and then go to Joe and Jules.
Yeah, I think this is one of the areas that is really hard for local municipalities to deal with because we're not getting the supportive housing dollars that counties get or the state get. Our bread and butter, and really it's a budgetary issue. Counties are the ones that are tagged and have the tax rate that deals with these services. And so I think what we're seeing and what the pandemic has brought to the surface, not necessarily highlighted, is the need for jurisdictions to work together because, we might have the land in the city and maybe we donate the land, but maybe the county runs the facility. And I think with all of us are in the metro that we just passed the supportive services ballot measure with Metro last year, and counties are working through right now their proposals of what that would mean. And so I've been inserting myself into that conversation because I do believe as a mayor, I understand my community far better than a county commissioner does that oversees, a larger area. So I think, the way that Metro is doling that money out is it's not coming directly to cities, it's going through the county. And so we have to work really hard to do it, to partner with them. But, our tax rate is really designed to fix roads, put in sidewalks, have police, have municipal services. And so we would either have to raise taxes to start addressing this issue, which essentially would double tax our constituents when the county's already doing it, or we need to put more pressure on the county to start delivering more services. Mm-hmm. That's the one I prefer.
Does anybody else want to comment on that one, or is I mean, if Lacey pretty much covered it, you can just say amen and we'll keep going.
Well, I agree with Lacey, and it's, we've had a terrible, terrible problem in this country addressing mental health issues since President Reagan basically defunded all structures to help people and families and support them. So yes, that money goes to the county and we rely on county services, but they're far and few between and they're just, tapped out. And so it's very, very difficult. I'll tell you, in West Linn, one of the biggest steps we've made is we've contracted with Lake Oswego to use their behavioral health unit for mental health police calls. So this person will go out with our police department on those particular calls and help to try and diffuse the situation and get that person or persons some help. So that's one big step, but there's so much more work to do. And I think about our youth and coming out of COVID, and, it's just going to be, we're all going to need to be really supportive and figuring out better ways to do this. So, that'll be a lot of the work as well.
Joe, did you have anything you want to add?
Well, yeah, I did all of that. I'll just say that, this really is one, that does require everyone at the local level, county level, and then at the state level as well, as talking about, funding services for, those least fortunate in our communities, and also just on a regular basis. We know that, so much of our, so we brought on recently this behavioral health specialist in our police department to work with, respond to certain calls, and it's great now working with West Linn, and Oregon City also has a behavioral health specialist on their force, and so there's some coordination going on there, which is great. But so many of the calls that we go on are substance abuse related, and Oregon has the absolute lowest, one of the lowest rates of access to substance abuse care in the entire country, and one of the highest rates of addiction in the entire country. So that's a mismatch that's a big problem, and we simply, as a state, do not fund substance abuse. There's a real stigma around it, and I really hope that that's something that we're going to change. But again, it's really difficult for Mayor Beaty, Mayor Walters, and myself, and these are not services that cities fund. We don't have the budget to fund substance abuse programs. So we're really reliant on the state working with the counties to be able to meet this need. So it does require good coordination. I think even, when the Clackamas County, they still haven't submitted their local implementation plan to Metro for the homeless services measure. And in fact, they were just recently having a debate on how they're going to fund homeless services even going forward, because they didn't understand that they weren't receiving the money until 2022. So they moved money out of the UGB and actually defunded some of the homeless services that are going on here in the county. So I really hope that, I know that we work closely with the county, but there needs to be more coordination, I think, with folks at the city level, because we do understand what's going on in our communities and are here to help. And so communication is critical.
That actually was, well, I have another question first, but we're going to get back to working with the counties. So we had a question in the chat that was specific to Mayor Walters, but I know everybody has a piece of this action. The question for Mayor Walters was, how does your city negotiate or improve your biggest traffic problem when Highway 43 and I-205 are out of your power to control? And this, I know, occurs all the way through Beaverton. You've got major roads that are state and or county controlled. And I'm, obviously Lake O has part of 43 too. So I don't know what else you have that the state controls, but I'll let Mayor Walters start with that one, and everybody else can jump in.
Well, thank you. And thanks, Nancy. That's the magic question for sure. It's been, we have, House Bill 2017 passed. They decided that they were going to use tolling to fix our infrastructure, including the Abernathy Bridge on I-205. And nobody in my city wants to be tolled. And unfortunately, out of the 5 tolling gantries that are planned for the entire region, 4 of them are in West Linn. But at this point, it seems, we've been advocating against it, but we know that the money needs to come from somewhere. And the roads need to be fixed, and they're not going to fix themselves. So, you know, we're just going to have to continue to try and make sure that it's spread out regionally, that it makes sense, that it's a clear program. Congestion pricing can be confusing. You're not quite sure how much you're paying and what time of day. And so all of those things need to come together. We're also partnering with Metro, or we tried to partner with Metro on their last of the 2020 transportation bond, which failed. That would have fixed our Highway 43 corridor, and also added more multimodal transportation on Highway 43, like ped paths, et cetera. And that's something that we definitely need, as well as more transit. We don't have a lot of transit in West Linn. We have the one corridor that goes down to Portland, another one that goes from the south end of town into Oregon City, but they don't really connect at the, you know, so it's very disjointed, and we don't have good east-west corridors to get from Tualatin, the Tualatin side, over to Oregon City. So we have a lot of veterans living in Tualatin, West Linn, who can't get to the VA Center in Oregon City. So there are a lot of things that can improve. You're right, Nancy, they're not in my hands. I mean, but I'm here to keep advocating and explain our situation, tell people what it's like for people to live in West Linn, to try to get somewhere. Joe and I were on a call with a council person from Happy Valley who was talking about, he just to test it out to see how long it would take to get from Happy Valley to Hillsborough, not in his car. And it took him 2.5 hours, changing buses, trains, walking. The last mile is really difficult. I mean, there's so many issues, and we definitely need, we need the funding, and we need comprehensive planning to make sure that we can keep it under control and prevent the diversion, which is a problem in Lake Oswego and West Linn for sure.
Lacey, did you want to add anything to that, or?
Yes, and to make it even more complicated, counties own a bunch of roads that run through our cities as well. And it's always the who owns the road, who's doing it. I, with a bunch of mayors, went and advocated at the state legislature for being able to vacate roads back to local jurisdictions. And unfortunately, it didn't get out of committee. But we know that we have to be able to control how things are going. You know, Beaverton has the max that runs through it, but it runs east and west, and our population center is north and south. So it's really awesome if you live in Hillsborough and you're commuting to downtown Portland, you could zip right through Beaverton. But for me, when I live a mile from the max station, I have to cross 2 major state highways to get there. Even though it's a mile, it's insurmountable with a toddler, if it's raining, if I miss the bus, if I'm relying on it. And so we have to work on last mile busing into neighborhoods to be able to really utilize the investment that prior generations put into our MAX system. You know, the federal government is also one of the probably biggest people to blame in this, because 70% of road construction used to be paid for by the federal government through the Highway Trust Fund. So I'm hoping with a new Democratic president, I'm hoping with, if they could get their act together, that we could actually see substantial investment in infrastructure for the first time, because our roadways, our bridges are crumbling. And again, we don't have the taxing ability to really maintain it. And yet we're the ones that are like, why is your city falling apart? And, you know, I advocated for a sidewalk in one of our lowest income neighborhoods, and it was $2.5 million to build a sidewalk down one side of a road. I mean, 250,000 buys you like a Monopoly piece that you could put out in front of your house. And so when we start talking about how much it costs, the reality is it's just never going to happen. But I know Mayor Walters and Mayor Buck have both been advocating about tolling. We've been talking about it at the mayor's level, and really with congestion pricing, who's going to bear that burden? It's going to be our working community members that have to work, that don't have the privilege to work off hours. And as our cities are starting to become more and more expensive, people are being forced out further, and they're going to be the ones that are going to end up paying to come work in our restaurants. And what we're going to end up doing is importing people to work in our communities and asking them to leave at the end of the day, and then charging them for that privilege.
Mhm.
Joe, did you have anything you want to add?
Yeah, no, they did a great job of answering that question.
So I think this is probably going to be my last question, but talk a little bit about the challenges of relationships with county commissions and cities. So let's see, who wants to start on that one? Let's let Joe start on
Oh,
that. I think
There's so we have a coordinating committee in Clackamas County that is made up of we get a couple of the county commissioners that are supposed to attend, and then different representatives from the city. And I'll say in general, we have great, I mean, in Clackamas County, well, we had a little turnover in some of the leadership at the county level there. And, they've had their own internal issues, to say the least. So I think with all the turnover also in the cities, I mean, we're just now starting to, get together. I will say that the mayors in Clackamas meet once a month with Chair Smith, and we're building a productive relationship with the chair, and finding, I mean, what's important is that we just find these areas of this common ground. But in Clackamas County, I mean, a big infrastructure funding is a huge issue. I mean, the county just has not for a long time had the money to maintain to maintain the roadways. And I mean, a lot of you will know that recently the prior county commission passed a vehicle registration fee, that the county hadn't previously had, and that money was intended, then to be used to pay for the roads. And as soon as the new county commission came in, they wanted to rescind the vehicle registration fee. And now that didn't fly with the majority of the commission, fortunately. But that's always where we're at in Clackamas County, is wanting, to seeing that we have these needs, but then really having a tough time figuring out how we're going to pay for them. And but in general, I think we have good, a good relationship. I mean, I'd say we have a much different county commission now, than we did just last year. And so it's an adjustment. I know it's an adjustment for Lake Oswego as the business, the biggest county in the city in the county, and just forming those. I mean, there's obviously, I guess, just to speak frankly, there's some big political differences between the county leadership and a lot of the leadership at the city level. But what's important is that we really have to, in some ways, we fight that balance of being good leaders for our community, and making sure that people understand that some of the things that are said by at the county level don't necessarily represent what we think here at the city level. But at the same time, we have to maintain really a good working relationship so that we can get things done with our counterparts at the county. So that's a delicate balance, because at the end of the day, we do all need to we need to work together and stay focused on what's going to move things forward for the people that need it the most in our county, and that requires good relationships, between city and county leaders.
Lacey?
I would say that the majority of what we do is actually pretty boring and not controversial at all. But I will say we're not Clackamas County. We have a really good, we have a very changing dynamic in differences here. We have an amazing county chair that works really hard to bring people to the table, and I consider her a friend and an ally in the work that we do. I'll just say though that values are boundaries. That's how we set up, good working relationships. When it's a point that your values are tested, that those are the boundaries in which the relationship can stretch or go. And, my job is to advocate for Beaverton community members. And sometimes even with a good friend like Chair Harrington, those things don't always align, but that's my job, is to come to the table and make sure that we are getting everything possible for our community. And at the end of the day, I think we all respect those boundaries with each other, that there's just some things that don't go. But I do think having good county commissioners at the table making decisions makes things a lot easier. And they're facing a lot of the same problems that we face: lack of revenue to do projects that they want to do. Beaverton's boundaries are Swiss cheese. It's really, we have a ton of overlapping between unincorporated Washington County and the city. And I think there's more work to do together in the future, but there is no shortcut to relationship building. I spend a considerable amount of my time talking to other electeds, just building relationships with them. So when I need them and when I have to withdraw from the bank account, I put in a lot of positive time to be able to do that.
Great. Well, I want to thank all of you. I think it's just been a great conversation. It's been very informative, and And I really hope everybody online really just appreciates. I agree that it's easy to overlook what's going on in our local communities, and yet that's what affects the quality of our life every day. And that's one of the reasons that I always get frustrated, because when we do have elections at the local levels, it's very hard to have people realize that this is an important thing, that they need to inform themselves and they need to get out and vote. And those of us who are in this group and are influential with our friends and neighbors need to talk to them about the importance of what's going on in our cities and our school boards, et cetera. So I do really want to thank you all, and we're getting some very nice compliments in the chat. So I hope you're all having a quick chance to read the chat as I finish up. As I mentioned before, this is our last meeting of this program season. I really want to thank everybody for being very patient with Willamette Women Dems as we learned how to use Zoom and try to maximize our programs and bring information to you. I think most of the time it worked pretty well. Every once in a while we had a hiccup, but that is to be expected. We are hoping and planning to be together in person. Starting in September, we will be back at the Celebrate Center, which is off Bangy Road, right where 217 and I-5 come together in the downstairs from the home builders. So we're really looking forward to seeing everybody. I do want you to know to watch for some emails. In July, we will have our membership renewal, which will be coming out. And a reminder that members of our organization receive a discount when we meet in person. And then in August, there'll be information and online registration if that's your preferred method for our September program. And we're working very hard on that one. We think you will really be excited about who our speaker will be in September. So please watch for those. Again, thank you for your patience as we adjusted to COVID and social distancing. And then my personal political pitch, please be sure that you are vaccinated. Everyone you know and love is vaccinated, and have a wonderful summer. And we look forward to seeing everyone in person in September. The date for September will be the second Thursday, which is September the 9th. So you can get that on your calendars now. And again, thank you, Mayor Walters, Mayor Beaty, and Mayor Buck. Great conversation.
Thank you.
And we can stop recording. Thank you.
Thank you.